Welcome to the Economy Magazine at I-24 News, where we take a look at the world markets and the global economy. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Well, coming up today, China, a focal point for international markets. Could malaise in the world's #2 economy trigger another economic recession for the world? We are joined by Dr. John Rutledge, Chief Investment Strategist at Safnet, for expert analysis. And in light of the tumult in China, we'll gauge just how Israeli markets are doing, and most notably the flow of investment into the high-tech sector. But first, let's start with the financial headlines. Most Asian markets closed lower on Tuesday, though China's Shanghai managed a 2.2% climb. Tokyo's Nikkei fell 2.7%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng dropped nearly 0.9%. But crude's plunge to nearly $30 a barrel helped lift European stocks. Once oil prices rallied into the afternoon, London's FTSE jumped close to 2%. Germany's DAX rallied some 2.5%, and France's CAC also climbed close to 2.5% higher. Well, in the U.S., worries emerged that the plunge in crude could sink U.S. oil producers, but the rebound in oil later in the day, at least for the moment, should ease those fears. Leading into the open, Dow futures were up in the triple digits. Well, the EU says Belgium's so-called sweetheart tax deals are illegal. Ruling the country must now claw back 700 million euros in illegal tax breaks. The EU claims that the Belgian scheme, implemented since 2005, enabled companies to cut their tax bill on profits by as much as 90%. International brewer Anheuser-Busch InBev confirmed it was one of the companies caught up in the investigation. European authorities also launched an investigation into McDonald's tax arrangements and is now set to deliver verdicts on Apple and Amazon's deals with Ireland and Luxembourg this year.
We have in the Commission concluded that the Belgian excess profits tax scheme is illegal under EU state aid rules. The scheme gave tax reductions of around 700 million euros to at least 35 mainly European companies. Belgium now has to recover the unpaid tax from the companies concerned.
The German Chancellor Angela Merkel said Monday that Europe is vulnerable in the wake of the refugee crisis. Speaking at an event near Frankfurt, Merkel said that Europe lacked the controls to handle the influx of thousands of migrants from war-torn areas in the Mideast and North Africa. Well, the German leader also stressed that the euro was directly linked to freedom of movement in Europe, warning that the European single market could even suffer if travel was curtailed. Well, now, in order to secure that free movement, Merkel emphasized the importance of securing the Eurozone bloc's external borders.
The euro and the freedom of movement across borders are directly linked. Nobody pretends that we have a common currency without being able to cross borders easily. The common market will surely suffer massively from this.
Turkey's Council of Ministers discussed a draft regulation offering Syrian refugees work permits in the cities in which they reside. Deputy Prime Minister Numan Kurtulmuş told reporters Monday that while hundreds of thousands of Syrians and other foreigners currently work illegally for low wages in Turkey, only 7,300 have legal work permits. He stressed that under new legislation, refugees would be able to apply for work permits specific to their place of residence.
Syrian refugees will obtain permission to work only in the cities where they receive their ministry-issued identification card. The number of Syrians employed in any given workplace will not exceed 10% of the total number of employees.
Moving to Israel, the Knesset Finance Committee approved a bill on Monday, laying out the terms now for Israel becoming one of 57 founding members of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. The AIIB is largely viewed as China's answer to the World Bank. Once passed into law, it would mark the first time Israel becomes a founding member of a global development bank. Committee Chairman Moshe Ganfi said the development could generate large economic and political returns for Israel's future. The bill is expected to pass its second and third readings in the Knesset, allowing Finance Minister Moshe Kahlon to finalize the treaty just in time for the bank's first official meeting in Beijing next week. Staying now on the topic of China, for the pulse on China and growing wariness in the markets, we are joined by Dr. John Rutledge of Safnet. Thank you very much for being with us.
Good morning, Natalie. How are you doing?
Good morning. Good to see you. Well, how serious is the Chinese tumult for the world markets now?
It's the biggest story going right now. It's a crisis story in the sense that there's been a market that's actually almost collapsed. but it's not the end of the world. And there are two or three things about it that I think the people talking about it have gotten the wrong way around. And so I think that's what we really want to talk about, is how do we understand what's actually happened there, as opposed to the hype we've been hearing about so much.
So you think this is a lot of hype? The investors are actually overreacting?
The story is being told as the economy weakened. Last weekend, there was a purchasing manager PMI report that was very weak. And then the stock market fell and the currency market fell, and that's going to make a recession in America. It's almost just the opposite of that. Really what happened is there are reasons the currency is falling, and there are reasons why investors are bailing out of China. That's pulling their markets down, and that's the source of the weakness in their economy, or one of the sources of their weakness. It's not going to cause a recession in the U.S. China trade is just too small for the U.S. for that to happen. It is a big deal in the markets, and right now it has pushed the markets to an oversold position. So today, I suspect we're going to have a big up day. It's starting out that way, but it's made things quite volatile and difficult to understand. But this is a capital flight story, and that's not going to go away.
Interesting. Well, do you see this potentially sparking a major world recession?
No, I don't think so. You know, the biggest, where it would cause the most damage, first of all, is in the commodity producers, because China's industrial sector is the buyer of last resort for copper and aluminum and iron ore and the other manufacturing metals. The same for energy. So a downturn in China means weak energy prices and falling commodity prices. Commodities today are at their lowest level since 2002, 14 years. One of the reasons for that, though, is not just China's slowing. They're intentionally changing the mix of their economy away from mining and heavy manufacturing and towards services. And in services, you don't light up a boiler and start the furnace, and you don't use any copper or aluminum. And so the commodity markets are going to be in a long-term slump because of that. And for that reason, I suspect oil prices have not finished they're not going up right now anyway. They haven't quite finished their fall.
Interesting. Well, we have seen oil sinking to incredible lows. Where do you see oil going?
Well, it's, you know, people talk about $20 oil from here. It's already $30, so it's not that far. The problem is when oil prices fall, it does change people's behavior. You know, we drive farther and we heat our houses more and so forth, but it doesn't do that very fast. So it takes years for that impact to happen. So the demand is not going to go up until the emerging markets get growing again. Emerging markets are those commodity producers I was talking about, and they're being hit by the China slowdown. So I think it's a pretty long time before you'd want to bet on rising oil prices.
Interesting. Well, let's talk about Russia for a moment. The ruble also tumbling to record lows. How low can the country go amid these sanctions that we've been seeing at a free-falling currency, and also now this quagmire in Syria?
Well, there's reasons why they're slowing internally, but the big driver, of course, is that half of the government's revenues come from selling oil, and the bulk of the rest of them from selling industrial commodities, all of which have been trashed by the China slowdown and the China restructuring. So they're hurting in the same way Australia is hurting, and Indonesia and Thailand and other commodity producers. I don't think that's going to go away, and it's going to hurt the cash flows of the Russian government, and maybe something that slows Mr. Putin down in his plans. All
right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, John. Do appreciate it. Moving on now and staying in this part of the world, the Jordanian stock exchange followed unease in China, taking a significant hit. Here's more on this story.
The news from the Amman Stock Exchange in Jordan is not good. The struggling market is seeing Jordanian investors look to other Middle Eastern states for more lucrative opportunities. And the decline has been taking place for some time.
The Amman Stock Exchange has been spiraling into decline for 6 years now. The past year ended with a drop of 1.5%, and this has led many Jordanian investors to invest in nearby Arab nations.
Trading in Amman in 2015 hit just $4.65 billion, while Jordanian money in the United Arab Emirates was 50% higher at over $6.7 billion. The latest numbers suggest that there is more bang for investors' bucks outside of Jordan. And for some, it is clear that the small investors are feeling the brunt of the negative impact.
If you want people's honest opinion, then most small investors are suffering losses. No one is making a profit. The reasons are, first of all, strategic companies only support themselves and not the market. And the government does not monitor the market well.
For many investors, Jordanian leadership has paid too little attention to the financial industry at large. They want the government to put time, care, and money into the market with a hands-on approach, as they have been seeing occur in China as that economy sputters in the early days of this year.
Well, in light of the tumult in global markets, largely fueled by the worries over China, we wanted to get a sense of how investment in Israel is being affected. Now, with us in studio is Kobi Sambursky, co-founder and managing partner at Gilot Capital. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, tell us about yourself and your company.
So I'm a software engineer by profession. I was an entrepreneur for most of my career. About 5 years ago, I started together with my partner Arek Gilot Capital, which is a venture fund investing in Israel's brightest entrepreneurs. We always try to find the unfair Israeli advantage. So we typically would take guys that are out of the various Israeli IDF technology units. So we do a lot of cyber activity and a lot of enterprise software activity.
Interesting. Well, let's go back on the topic of the tumult in the markets, primarily in China. How has that influenced the Israeli markets, and most notably the investment going into high tech?
Yeah, so it's still hard to say. Obviously, when the public markets are suffering, at some point it will also, get to the level of private companies and VCs. So far, the situation is very good. 2015 was very, very good. We had over $9 billion in exits from Israeli companies in 2015. A lot of new funds around, a lot of big enterprise companies investing in Israel. So far, so good. It's very, very good. We're actually seeing also some people running off from China and from Russia to Israel. But again, if markets continue to be very, very weak, it will have an impact on us as well.
Well, Israel has certainly managed to create and very much exhibit this incredible startup culture that is known internationally, especially in business circles. How would you describe, what is it like working in this kind of climate?
First, it's a lot of fun. I have to say that, every day, at least for me, it's like not so much like work. Sometimes it's even more about fun. I can tell that when I started my career, I was probably around 20 years old. I was able to get into, as an IDF officer, I was able to get into one of the elite technology units. And I was actually certain that for the first few years I will just sit down and they'll teach me what to do. And then, very quickly they gave me a little bit of budget, a few people, a very important task, and I just had to, either make it or not. And I think this is the type of atmosphere that you'll see a lot with Israeli startups as well. So you see small groups of people, mostly very, very talented, big tasks, lots of challenges, but it's a lot of fun, and this is, I think this is what really drives this entire ecosystem, is the drive and the talent of young people.
Interesting. Well, we're also seeing that the VC space is quite strong. Last year in 2015, VC-backed exits reached a total of $5 billion.
Yeah, that's correct.
What do you see for 2016?
So again, it's hard to say, but I'm, carefully optimistic, I would say. So we see, as you say, we see a lot of new money flying in, international money as well, and also money from inside of Israel. So we see a lot of activity from international funds, money flying in from China and Russia and other places. We have a bunch of new funds around us, and I'm sure we'll see this money continuing to be poured into our ecosystem and help companies. On the other hand, we have to be a little bit careful because of what we see on the public markets. And at least the way we try to treat it is we try to continue to be very aggressive on investments, but invest only in companies that are not bubble, that really have a business model, so that if situation becomes different, they can still be very, very successful based on their own products and services.
Speaking of that, what companies have you invested in? Most recently, at least.
Yeah. So again, we always try to find the unfair Israeli advantage, and it typically translates to stuff that is going on within the various units of the IDF. So one good example is a company called Insights that are about cyber intelligence. So what they try to do is they try to look for intelligence indications within the darknet and deep web that will tell you about, or tell us about, attacks even before they arrive to your network. So you can actually block attacks before they arrive. And it's a combination of people that have done within the IDF cyber and also intelligence stuff, so they have all the knowledge. Another interesting example is a company called Solbit, and they can actually block cyber attacks in real time, which is very, very important. Again, combination of people coming from Army cyber units as well as Elbit, which is a very, very strong as well.
Well, we'd love to have you back again. That's all the time we have for now. That concludes our program today. Do stay tuned here every day for all your global economic coverage. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Thank you so much for watching.